All right, so let's get started, ladies. Um, you are all amazing women in tech. Um, how'd you get there? Tell me a little bit about your journey. And Nilu, why don't we start with you because you crossed several continents in your journey in tech. So we'll start with the one who traveled the most distance, and then we'll move on, and we'll end with Michelle because that jump from tech to legal is also an interesting question about your journey. So Nilu, why don't you start?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's an honor to be among Trudy and Michelle and Molly. What a great panel. Can't wait to continue to share our stories. Yes, I have traveled continents. As my Texas accent gives it away, I'm originally from India, born and brought up in India. And, as when I was growing up way back in 1970s, India truly belonged to boys. It belonged to boys where boys had all the entitlement from inheritance, from taking on the doctor degree, lawyer degree, MBAs. But for women, the path was pretty much set. You grow up, turn 18, get married, and become a housemaker, homemaker. And of course, there are always exceptions, and I'm so glad that I was one of those. We were in the house of three girls, and my dad had the foresight to put us into STEM when STEM was not even the word. I was so fortunate that I was able to do and take on the master's degrees in mathematics and also another master's degrees from the Ivy League University of India, which is Indian Institute of Technology. I was able to do my master's in technology there. And honestly, be able to do all of those opportunities and climb through those opportunities. I moved to this country at the time when there was no Dr. Google. There was no YouTube of the world that could teach me the cultural differences. I was walking into the country. I walked in with one suitcase into this country with one suitcase. Half of that had my wedding gown in it, quite frankly. So I had to build everything from grounds up. Yes, I had two degrees in my hand, but I spoke British English. I understood British English. So trying to understand American culture, American language, starting from ground zero, trying to figure out everything I needed for the house. I remember I stopped at McDonald's and I could not even order myself a burger. I didn't eat beef and trying to figure out what do I pick from this, right? I remember going to Super Target then, trying to buy a shampoo for myself, and I couldn't, none of the I picked up a shampoo where there was an African American lady on that shampoo, and that hair resonated with my hair, and you can imagine the mess that happened after that, right? So my confidence was truly in pebbles when I moved it into this country. I had to start from ground zero, in spite of all the education I had, in spite of everything I had learned, and I took on the most junior role I could take on in McKesson at the time, and really started transforming myself from trying to figure out how to make coffee, how to drive in this country, how to really understand the lingo, how to speak up and get my voice and get a seat at the table. I kept waiting for someone to pull the chair for me, and until I learned that no one is going to pull a chair for me. I have to figure out what is my chair and how am I going to get that seat at the table. Sky was the limit as I started transforming myself and truly coming from Pebble and started growing those wings slowly and started asking for my mentors and my coaches and sponsors that I built and the network of mentors that I built along the way. And truly those wings took on and I turned into a small butterfly. I'm still in this journey. The journey has not finished, and I'm hoping to become a most beautiful butterfly I can ever become sometimes before this life is over.
I think you're already there, but and you don't give yourself enough credit. But you did something really interesting with your career. So, and and perhaps, right, this is that out of the box thinking that you bring to the table. But a lot of us think of consulting and consulting gigs as kind of the end of career. You used it in a different way. And can you explain to us how you used consulting gigs? Because I think it's
Absolutely.
fascinating.
Absolutely, Molly. So, um, I greatly enjoyed working for Cadbury and Dr. Pepper Snapple Group, but I was number two reporting to a CIO then. And great CIO I was working for, great team I had. But I realized that I was at a point where if I wanted to grow further, I had to move out of Dr. Pepper because my CIO was very comfortably placed. I didn't have a room to grow. And but I didn't know what market had to offer because I was working for Cadbury and had worked for Cadbury and Dr. Pepper for 18 years. So I had never ever ventured out in the market. I was, I didn't have my LinkedIn, I didn't have my resume, I didn't know anyone outside that building, right? All the network that I had built was within that building. And I took the biggest risk to let go of that stable comfort job that I had. I knew everyone in that organization. I was very comfortably placed. And I was a high performer, which means I didn't have to prove myself over and over again. And I actually decided to move out, took on a consulting role. And in that consulting role, I decided to take and only work for 3 days a week. Another 2 days I set aside to really network, to understand what's out there, what's available, who can I partner with, what's happening in the companies, what LinkedIn or resume do I need to build, what's my value, where can I apply, how do I, which industry should I go into, will someone take me as a CIO or not, because I really wanted that C-suite role. And in that journey, quite frankly, 3 days I worked as a consultant. But those 2 days, working days, and two Saturday, Sunday, 4 days of the week, I had probably 8 to 9 cups of coffee, starting from 7 in the morning till 9 in the night. And every hour I maximized to get to know people. And I learned and grew so much that I had no idea what was out there. And before you know, I landed a CIO role. I always say that always be mindful and be very intentional. And that intentional focus that I had landed me a CIO role that I have truly enjoyed and cherished for the last 5 years.
Awesome. Well, we'll get into a little bit of that. Trudy, I think you're up next. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey through tech? And you manage IT infrastructure across continents right now. So, I think you might have some of the distance, maybe not in traveled yourself, but definitely in the people you manage.
Thanks so much. So before I get started and talking about me, I just want to do a shout out for the USPTO. So our company does probably 30, on average 30 patents a year. We have a very entrepreneurial company, lots of chemical-based products. And during the pandemic, we've bumped that up to over 50 patents a year. So it's really interesting that I think all that time with people home and being able to dream up new things, and it's been really great for the entrepreneurial spirit. So thank you to everyone who assists us in that journey around the patent and IP. Thank you to people like Michelle who do the IP law. This stuff is pretty tricky, and we need a lot of help from all of you. So thank you to everyone who supports us in that way. So my journey is very different than Nilu's. I didn't show up with any degree, so I had to put myself through school. My first big job was with American Express, grown-up job, and I used the American Express employee assistance to be able to go to school, and it took me almost 12 years to finish my degree. So took a long time. I have been a corporate gypsy. I've been in many different industries. So I've worked at, one of the most fun ones was Victoria's Secret. It was a ball working at Victoria's Secret. Office Depot, Joann Stores, Hager Clothing Company here in Dallas, which is responsible for the NFL gold jackets, the guys that go into the Hall of Fame. That's the Hager Clothing Company. But my real leadership training and confidence training really came from two places, and that was American Express and JP Morgan. You know, working on Wall Street is an experience that everyone should go through, but only when they're young. You have to have the energy for that. So I was a different kind of pebble turning into a butterfly. You know, the first time I got a manager job, everyone who was working for me made lots and lots more money than I did because I started without a degree. So I got the same, you know, 2% or 3% increase that everybody else got, but I started at a much lower level. So there's a lot to learn in that, right? You need to learn a lot of people skills. When you move from not only company to company, but state to state, you know, there's a degree of trust in what you're doing, right? You need to be able to rely on the people around you. And that comes from, I think, confidence and maturity, right? You need to be able to trust the people around you. And that's a great lesson for all of us. I think a lot of us in tech are, we're a little introverted. We're used to a lot of people with great expertise. We don't want anyone to know that we can't do that or we don't know that. And I think as a leader, you need to be able to put your shortcomings out there, right? You need to plug in people who can help you, and you need to be able to ask for help. And I think that's really important. I've had an amazing career. I did the consulting route for just a very short while before I was hired on as the CIO at NCH Corporation. I was the interim CIO there. So I was doing consulting. And when they hired me, the guy who hired me into the consulting role said, now, don't you get comfortable here because we're going to actually find somebody who knows how to do this job and then you'll be out of here. So don't get comfortable. So in 60 days, they had hired me on for the CIO role and I've been there for 12 years now.
But don't get comfortable, Trudy.
I'm still not. So in IT, we all know this. In IT, there is no comfort. Whatever you knew yesterday doesn't apply today. And what you learn today may not apply for tomorrow. And that's why all of those people skills, all of the team working, the team building, the relationship building, the collaboration, that really does carry the day because all of the technology changes so fast. So that's just a little bit about me.
I love it. Okay, Michelle, on to you. Tell us a little bit about your journey into tech and then to IP law.
Yeah, those are really tough acts to follow. I'm maybe still at like the caterpillar stage of my journey here in comparison. That I grew up in New Jersey, have mostly lost the accent, but not completely. As noted by Molly, I went to undergrad and did my degree in chemistry at Washington and Lee University. And that was basically because I've always been really curious about a lot of different topics. So I was trying to weigh, like, should I be an English major? Should I be a neuroscience major? And my advisor at the time was like, let's be practical. Like, let's pick a subject that's easy to, you know, go to graduate school with. And so I studied chemistry, double majored with natural sciences and mathematics. And it was a liberal arts university. So I got to do like everything from PE and squash and ice skating to like, you know, philosophy and religion and all different kinds of things, which was really amazing and highly recommend. My plan during college had always been to go ahead and get my PhD. I was very fortunate in being able to have some opportunities to do undergraduate research at my university. Following my junior year, I actually went out to the Scripps Research Institute out in California and thought, like, this would be my dream graduate school. And that's where I learned discipline because the desk they assigned me actually looked out over the Torrey Pines golf course, and you could see people sailing and gliding. And I was like, how am I supposed
Wow.
to get any work done if this is my alternative? I can just like literally sit and daydream out the window. So I, physical change. I moved my desk to the corner facing the wall so that I could try to accomplish any research during that summer. Um, but it also gave me the chance to, daydream a little and come to the determination that as much as I really enjoyed the science that I was doing, and it was mostly organic chemistry and kind of that biochemistry front where I would have likely pursued something in the pharmaceutical realm, I liked hearing about the end product and how that could be helpful to people and working with all our collaborators along the way. The idea of and prospect of going through a PhD program, which, takes 5 to 7 years, involves a substantial amount of work. I just didn't think I quite had that commitment to it. And it was much more the people piece. So I scrambled at the last minute, heading into my last year of college. What was I going to do with myself? And quickly decided that law school still left a lot of doors open. I had heard about patent law. I didn't really know what that meant, but thought that I at least had a science background, so maybe that could be somewhat useful in that field. And ended up going to school out in Silicon Valley. Was really fortunate that I think I only maybe worked on one kind of chemistry related pharma case while I was in private practice, but having that chemistry background and moving to IP law just meant that I wasn't afraid of science. A lot of lawyers go into the law because they don't like math and science and would feel much more comfortable in a, political science or debate kind of realm. But I wasn't afraid of the science. They have lots of experts that you work with. It gave me the opportunity to continue to learn new things and to always be around, kind of cutting edge technology. Interesting enough, I got a lot of questions as I was going through the law firm application process, like, why are you here? What is this background about? Now, I think you take a lot of IP lawyers for granted and they're much more popular. It's a much more common career path that's planned out in that way. But at the time, I really saw a lot of analogies between chemistry and the law. In particular, you're working with the laws of science. There are certain things that you cannot change, that's the precedent, and you still need to be really creative in trying to get to the end solution that you're looking for, working within these particular rules and trying to be efficient about it. So I really enjoyed that challenge and was lucky enough to be able to do a lot of IP litigation when I was in private practice, and had the opportunity to move in-house at Dell Technologies, where I got to meet Molly and Hope. And it was a really, really deep dive into the IP realm. So doing everything from, supporting M&A due diligence to helping to manage the patent portfolio and doing those patent mining and patent harvesting sessions with our inventors, trying to get more people interested in the program and understanding what it meant. A lot of people think to get a patent, it has to be like, inventing a new law of gravity or physics or something. And really what we're looking for are those incremental improvements that are really novel and can be groundbreaking in and of themselves. So I had the opportunity at Dell to really get very deep within the IP realm and wanted to further develop my legal credentials. So moving to Cirrus Logic was a great opportunity to be able to see, not just what working within a technology company and still having access to a lot of excitement and innovation, but also getting a better understanding of all of the other aspects of what goes on to make a company successful. And so a lot of that comes into some of the challenges and growings that I've done in the last couple of years here.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk about that. I would say whether it was Snowvid in Texas, as you all refer to it, we deal with snow a little differently here in Colorado. I think it's actually snowing right now. And then, but also the pandemic, I think, really set everyone on their heels, and forced everyone to look at change in a different way, and perhaps realize some innovations along the way. But Nilu, you were already in the process of transforming this very physical company, an ice making company, and adding, changing almost completely, this ice company into the digital realm. And I don't know how the pandemic played out in that, but why don't we start with you and just talk a little bit about that transformation?
Absolutely, Molly. So I'll add on to the story I was telling you about how I landed a CIO role in Ready Ice, right? And the power of networking is what helped me. But quite frankly, I was so excited about taking on that seat at the table that I didn't realize that I didn't ask quite the questions I should have asked during my interview. So what I mean by that is on day 2 of joining Ready Ice, I took a route ride and I said, all right, let's get on the truck and understand what our how our customers are served, what my drivers and technicians have to deal with, right, on a daily basis. And we went and delivered. So this route ride was to deliver to a Walmart store bags of ice and the pallet of ice. To my surprise, when we pulled up in front of the Walmart, my driver pulled out pieces of paper, and on the first piece of paper, he wrote down, I just delivered 2 pallets of ice to Walmart. Walmart owes us $140. And then right underneath, there was a carbon copy, and he pulled out a carbon copy and gave a handwritten note to Walmart and pulled out a carbon copy and put it in the big brown bag or a box that was in his truck. And when turned around, literally those were all the deliveries we had made that day. And everything was handwritten. Those were the invoices that we had to figure out how we were going to recover that money from the Walmart, the racetrack, the Kroger's, the 7-Elevens of the world. Literally, I had the same reaction, and I turned back in and I said, all right, let's understand who our customers are. To my surprise, there were about 25 different versions of Walmart in the system. So who was placing an order versus who we were delivering to, versus who we were invoicing, and versus who was paying was nothing but a cobweb in our systems. Multiple sources of truth, multiple systems that were not talking to each other. I said, all right, it can get worse than this. Let me understand how customers are placing an order. I stayed on the call for 40 to 45 minutes, waiting for customer call to be answered. It was similar to American Airlines. When I was flying American Airlines 10 years ago, on my way to the flight, I would make that 1-800 phone call, right? Trying to make sure that my flight is on time, which terminal it's going to come in, right? And all of those, what gate. We didn't have that information on our fingertips. And on our way to the airport, we were figuring that information out. And our customers were doing exactly the same. They were making phone calls to place ice orders and were staying on the call for 40 to 45 minutes. And so on and so on. And I started seeing tons of homegrown activities. People from their garage were turning on these systems. There was no support between the business and IT. We were not seeing eye to eye. And to my further surprise, my IT team only had a handful of people who were at the verge of retirement because the only thing they knew was how to keep green terminals AS400 up. So quite frankly, I learned that week that I had picked up every rock I was picking up. I was putting that rock back on and saying, let me go pick up another pebble and let me pick up another rock and understand what was underneath it. And there were snakes or the lizards underneath it. And I put everything back. And that Saturday, after first week of figuring all of this out, Saturday, I'm having a quick coffee with my husband, and he asked how my first week was at the new job. And I spent 1.5 to 2 hours telling him what I had experienced. And my eyeballs had popped out during that conversation. And at the end of that, I said, I'm going to now work on my resignation so that Monday I'm going to quit this job. This is a recipe of failure. My husband very patiently heard my story after hours. He said, have you thought about what if you are successful? and you are able to turn around what you have inherited, and what could the transformation look like at Ready Eyes? Quite frankly, until that point, I was filled with fear. I was only thinking about failures. I was only thinking about what's going to go wrong, until he really asked me that question, and I started thinking about, can there be a transformation? Can something turn around? What would that look like? What would our drivers be doing different? What would our customers be experiencing differently, right? What would IT look like? What would talent look like? What would trust and courage and leadership look like at Ready Eyes, right? If we were to turn this around. And by Monday morning, when I went in, I did not go in with a resignation. I went in with a complete different mindset, a mindset where winning was on top of mind, where transformation was on top of mind. And that was 5 years ago, Molly. And pandemic happened 2 years ago, right? So we were on the transformation journey of winning hearts and minds of not only our drivers and technicians. We are a blue collar organization, but our hearts and minds were all about winning among the 80,000 customers we serve in the nation. We went out of those green terminals. We started transforming how we are going to realize revenue correctly, right? We started transforming that no more paper and handwritten invoices to the Walmart, and we started digitizing every aspect of Ready Eyes, right? Touching our customers, where our customers started placing order through text, or with a one-touch quick ordering app, that as soon as they touched that quick order, we knew who they were, where they were placed, what their capacity was, how many pallets of ice they needed. We transformed that one touch into orders, into forecasting, into planning, into routing, and getting that ice on the truck. And next day, ice was on its way to the customer, right? So when you start to think about, we build digital highways, we won heart and minds, and before you know, March 2020 happened. But quite frankly, if this was a Ready Eyes of 5 years ago, we would have been hit so bad that there is no way we could deliver ice. But thank goodness for the transformation energy we were on. Within 24 hours, we were able to turn on every remote capability we could turn on for 160 locations nationwide, that we did not miss the beat. We were a consumer product goods, as you shared, your 12-year-old needed, and people were hoarding food, they were scared, there was a lot of meat in everyone's houses. In southern nation, the temperatures were soaring, right? And people wanted to keep their pools cold. So ice demand actually surged while it had shut down, where American Airlines was not flying, and we lost a lot of revenue from the airline industry. We lost a lot of revenue from special events, the NFL, the NBAs, and all. Everything had shut down, but our ice surge happened, and so transformation for us really meant is continue to serve the customer and make sure we're never out of stock, right? Wherever we lost revenue from the airline industry and whatnot, we started shifting over to the Grub hubs and Uber Eats and whatnot, which we had never thought that we will be able to serve the consumer directly. We were able to start to shift our energy to the business models like healthcare and nursing facilities. And people needed to take care of the vaccination, needed eyes, and we didn't have those business models earlier, and we started transforming. And all of this was possible because we were on the journey, and we were building digital highways, and we were winning hearts and minds up and down the chain. And leadership really meant something else to us. And another fun fact, we actually never went remote. We were only remote for 4 weeks during the month of April 2020. The entire company came back in full capacity, 5 days a week, physically at every location on May the 3rd, 2020. And since then, we never went home.
Well, until today.
Until today, I am remote, which is like what just happened. We are dealing with some bed bugs issue at our location. And all of a sudden we had to figure out to go remote. And I wasn't quite prepared to take this call from home, but look, thank goodness for the technology that we were able to accommodate all that. Thank you, Molly, for this question.
Thank you, Nilu. Michelle, tell me a little bit, because I know like it wasn't just the pandemic and taking everybody remote at Cirrus, but it was also, I mean, you guys work in a fairly heavy, semiconductor electronics and all of those kinds of things. And as we hear in the news, that's been really an issue from a supply chain perspective. So can you talk just a little bit about your journey with Cirrus and kind of some of the transformations that you've had to encounter over the last 2 years?
Yeah, sure. I'll take those probably separately, since on the COVID response, I was kind of more directly personally involved, and then the supply chain issues has been, transformative for the entire industry. I have less of a direct role in that, but it certainly has impacted, every aspect of every employee's life here. So in the COVID response, I think it was one of those where it was really all hands on deck. Pretty quickly to try to figure out what we were going to do. Pre-COVID, we had been a 100% in the workplace type of corporate culture and sent everybody home around spring break in March of 2020. It was learning a new area of the law for me. So, getting up to speed as quickly as we could on kind of health and safety law and what was coming out of OSHA and what kinds of questions we could monitor for from a compliance perspective with the Equal Employment Office. Our first priority was making sure that our employees were safe and that we could keep them as, healthy as possible. But also needed to make sure that we were still being productive, right? We had contracts and deadlines and customers that were waiting for our materials that they required in order to incorporate them, further down the line into the consumer electronics that we're all using today. So it was really just, I watched some of my friends on Facebook be like, oh, nothing to do, like this whole COVID thing. I'm just stuck at home. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm working like nonstop and everyone around me is going at 130%. But it was actually really invigorating because you felt like everybody was really pulling together for a common goal. Our executive team had really done an outstanding job of already having strong relationships in place with our employee base. And so I think there was a good feeling of trust between the management with the employees and vice versa with the employees and management, that they knew, our head of HR had sent out baskets of fruit and vegetables to everybody at the very beginning when it was almost impossible. Like you were scared to go into the grocery store. You couldn't get curbside delivery for like weeks and weeks. And so like, I remember the day we got a basket of fresh fruit and it was like, oh my God, this is the most amazing gift ever. And face masks and things like that to really make sure that people and their families were taken care of. That lasted through the whole pandemic. We got, playing board games and puzzles for our family to do when you were still trapped at home in the very beginning. And they had a weekly session of online activities for your children to make sure that they were, learning something and otherwise occupied during the day when they were still home from school at the very beginning. And I think the management team really saw a lot about how productive and how committed our employees could be while working remotely. We had a handful of individuals that require, special laboratory equipment and research facilities that they had to come on site. And so our first priority was making sure that they could be safe. At the very beginning, it was like getting travel letters in case they got stopped by a police officer. Was semiconductor, considered critical infrastructure so that we were able to even have employees in our office, and monitoring all the various, international, national, state, federal, local laws. And sometimes those weren't completely aligned, especially in the state of Texas, right? Where the city of Austin might be thinking a little bit differently than our governor might be on some of those things. This is the
sort
only
of
instance. But so it was a lot of work, really amazing. Our, team worked to develop an app pretty quickly so that we could monitor symptoms at the very beginning. It eventually evolved into, looking at vaccination status, and on the, legal compliance side, making sure that we're considering all of the data privacy issues and cybersecurity issues, and how are we keeping our folks safe from that perspective as well. And that has, continued to evolve as we go about, how what it's going to look like as we return to office, which we still haven't done yet, actually. I am in my office today. Yes. And I think in June, we're looking at coming back twice a week for starters. And that has been a huge, transformation. We're still excited to see how it goes. But working remotely definitely has pros and cons, right? As I'm sure you've all seen, with being able to pull some teams together who would otherwise be in different offices. It made everybody kind of on an even playing field from that perspective. But we do, miss our in-person happy hours and a lot of the culture that we have in our office here. So I know folks are really excited about getting back to that. And the supply chain side is a completely different story. I mean, it's really at the beginning, I think people were concerned that, oh, everything's going to shut down. We don't know for how long, but people are staying home. It'll be difficult to be productive. But demand has been, historically unprecedented. So there's like an incredible mismatch between the highest demand that the industry as a whole has ever seen with the availability of resources. And it, stemmed from the pandemic with, we're fabless. So a lot of our manufacturing, assembly, and test all takes place in Asia. And with, China's zero COVID policies, there are a lot of places were shut down, slowed down. Barges getting stuck in the canal affected transportation, with flights grounded or not going as frequently. It affected distribution channels. At the same time as that, you had, people needing to set up home offices, needing to get all their kids online, needing to, have something to do to entertain themselves. People weren't flying necessarily, so they wanted to buy a new car and go traveling, and just the demand for the types of products that my company supplies to, which are things like, mobile devices and laptops and AR and VR headsets. It was just really incredible. A truly too much of a good thing that we've struggled to keep up with. And that means everything from increased costs to working with customers. We had traditionally only had, a couple of long-term agreements in place with our foundries, and that has changed. We're trying, we've made public that we have a longer term, wafer reservation agreement and have prepaid for wafer capacity going into the future with some foundries. We're looking to expand out what other, capacity arrangements we might be able to have, which then implicates, by nature of where they're located, in geopolitical and national security concerns, some export control issues, and the timeline of that is often outside of our control. It's impacted things like sales compensation agreements. When your sales team literally can't meet the quotas because they're selling like more than we have product to be able to provide to our customers, how do you fairly compensate them? What do you do when your materials costs are going up, but you might have fixed customer prices that you've already agreed to long term? And so it's really been incredible, and our team has done an amazing job pulling together and communicating to make sure that we are all supporting each other and doing our best to be transparent with our customers and to provide them with the best services possible.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I hear your point about sometimes things being too much of a good thing. And, I do think we've all learned lessons over the course of the pandemic. One is that I am truly in the role that I was meant to be in, and not like a fifth grade teacher. So
just a for instance there.
My son even went up to his fifth grade teacher and said, I want to come back because we saw her at church. I want to come back with you. I don't like my new teacher, which was me. But Trudy, tell us a little bit about how NCH fared over the course of this and some of the transformations that I know you've overseen over the years, especially because I think you were responsible at American Express and driving that first corporate credit card reporting data warehouse. So you've been kind of a transformational leader your entire career. So I just want to have you talk a little bit about some of those transformations or the pandemic, whatever is top of mind for you.
So as you talked about NCH, Molly, it's a 100-year-old company, but what started NCH was the first pandemic, the Spanish flu. So that's where our company got its start. So some of the first products that we developed were cleaning products and germicides and things that kept buildings and seats and windows clean. And as you had mentioned, we also had hand sanitizer way back then. Now those are very, very old product lines, and we don't really invest much in those product lines because we've got a burgeoning water treatment business and a plumbing products business, and we're one of the world's best lubrications for specialty industries. But during the pandemic, that hand sanitizer that we used to make maybe one time a year became every day, 24 hours a day, all over the world. So we had run out of the little hand sanitizer containers, and then we just went bigger and bigger and bigger. And everybody said to us, "We don't care what you put it in. Put it in 5-gallon pails. We'll take it in whatever you have it in." So that was amazing, right? To be able to move that product line from just a mothball product line to be part of the forefront of what we did. Another thing that's really interesting about NCH Corporation, we are in 58 countries, and we still sell face-to-face. We are one of the world's largest direct selling entities, and certainly probably the